At home, Britain was still living with the aftershocks of the Industrial Revolution. Factories demanded vast supplies of raw materials. Investors searched for safe and profitable destinations for their capital. Shipyards needed steady contracts to survive. Newspapers fed the public a daily diet of imperial maps, medals, and victories, turning expansion into a source of national pride. Politicians also discovered a practical truth. Overseas success could distract voters from poverty, labor unrest, and bitter political struggles within Britain itself. India remained the heart of the imperial system. After the uprising of 18 meant the British Crown ended company rule and took direct control, turning India into the empire's central pillar. It was an enormous market, a major source of tax revenue, and a supplier of cotton, tea, jute, wheat, and most importantly, labor. Britain built railways, telegraphs, canals, and courts across the subcontinent, but these projects were designed primarily to strengthen control, move goods efficiently, and keep the system stable. Indian production became closely tied to British industry, while Indian society was managed through bureaucracy, policing, and policies that encouraged division rather than unity. One of Britain's most powerful instruments during this era was the Indian Army. Britain simply did not have enough soldiers of its own to police such a vast empire. Indian troops were deployed far beyond the subcontinent, serving in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. This created a striking contradiction, an empire maintained in part by people who were themselves denied political freedom within it. Strategic routes became just as important as land. The opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 transformed global travel by drastically shortening the sea journey to India and Asia. Britain moved quickly to secure its position, purchasing shares in the canal in 1875 and occupying Egypt in 1882, officially claiming the move was temporary. It was not. Egypt became a permanent link in a chain of strategic points that included Gibraltar, Malta, Cyprus, and Aden, guarding the main artery of the empire. Across the Middle East and the Indian Ocean, Britain tightened its grip. Aden protected shipping lanes while agreements with rulers in the Persian Gulf helped keep rivals out and trade flowing. The empire increasingly resembled a system of global logistics, built around ports, coaling stations, telegraph cables, and narrow choke points that controlled movement and commerce. Meanwhile, the balance of power in the world was shifting. Germany unified in 1871 and began challenging Britain in industry and military strength. France sought to rebuild its prestige after defeat in Europe. Russia pushed steadily south in Central Asia. The rivalry between Britain and Russia, known as the Great Game, became a tense struggle fought through diplomacy, espionage, and pressure along distant frontiers. Britain feared that if Russia reached Afghanistan or Persia, India itself would be exposed. To prevent this, Britain turned surrounding regions into buffers. Afghanistan became a hard frontier where Britain fought wars to block Russian influence. Persia became a zone of constant rivalry. In Burma, a series of wars ended with full annexation in 1886, adding the territory to British India and securing access to Southeast Asian trade. In Malaya and Singapore, Britain expanded control over tin and rubber, creating another highly profitable base in Asia. China also played a crucial role. Earlier victories in the Opium Wars had forced China to open ports and accept unequal treaties. Hong Kong became a vital British base. As other powers carved out spheres of influence, Britain worked to protect its commercial dominance, often through pressure and naval strength rather than outright conquest. Here, empire meant access and advantage more than direct rule. The most dramatic expansion came in Africa. For decades, Europeans had stayed largely on the coasts. By the 1880s, new medicines reduced disease, modern weapons increased military advantage, and railways and steamships made deeper penetration possible. Competition between European powers turned Africa into a race. Leaders spoke of civilization and the end of slavery, but the true motives were land, minerals, trade routes, and strategic position. In 1884 and 1885, European powers met at the Berlin Conference to divide Africa on paper. The borders they drew ignored local societies entirely. Britain pushed aggressively, aiming to protect routes and expand its reach. In southern Africa, Britain clashed with African kingdoms and Boer republics. The Zulu War of 1879 shocked the empire when a British force was destroyed at Isandlwana, before Britain returned with overwhelming force and conquered the region. In West Africa, British influence spread along the Niger, blending private company power with government rule to form vast colonies. In East Africa, Britain established control in Kenya and Uganda, building railways inland and reshaping land systems. Resistance was met with violence and colonial order was imposed. Britain's occupation of Egypt also drew it into Sudan. The modest uprising challenged imperial authority, and the death of General Gordon in 1885 became a rallying cry in Britain. By 1808, after brutal campaigns using modern firepower, Sudan fell under British control in all but name. Everywhere, the same pattern appeared. Traders and missionaries arrived first, followed by advisors, treaties, protectorates, and finally direct rule. Resistance was labeled rebellion. Conquest was described as restoring order. Infrastructure was built, but wealth flowed outward. At the same time, Britain governed settler colonies differently. In Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, European settlers demanded self-rule. Britain granted autonomy while maintaining loyalty to the crown, laying early foundations for the Commonwealth. Yet even here, indigenous populations suffered displacement and cultural destruction. By the 1890s, British ambition reached its peak. Some leaders dreamed of a continuous empire from Cape Town to Cairo. Figures like Cecil Rhodes embodied this ruthless vision. It helped lead to the Second Boer War in 1899, a long and controversial conflict that exposed the moral and financial costs of empire. By the time Queen Victoria died in 1901, Britain appeared unbeatable on the map. Yet beneath the surface, the empire was strained. Rivals were growing stronger, colonies were organizing politically, and the burden of holding the world was becoming heavier with each passing year.